The door slammed open with a bang. A small girl, no older than 10, stood in the doorway. Her clothes were dirty and torn, her hair tangled like a bird's nest. Her eyes were wild, red from crying, and her cheeks streaked with dust. She stared straight at the millionaire sitting beside the hospital bed, his tailored suit crisp and his face cold as stone. Behind him, 2 doctors in white coats froze, their hands hovering over a machine with blinking lights. "Don't kill my daddy," the girl screamed, her voice cracking. The millionaire's sharp eyes narrowed. He didn't move, didn't blink. The room smelled like antiseptic and fear. The girl took a shaky step forward, her bare feet leaving smudges on the polished floor. One of the doctors muttered, "Security," into a walkie-talkie. The girl didn't care. She ran to the bed where a thin, pale man lay unconscious, tubes snaking into his arms. His face was sunken, his breathing shallow. She grabbed his limp hand and glared at the millionaire. "You can't do this. He's alive." The millionaire finally stood up, his polished shoes clicking softly. "Who let this child in here?" he asked quietly, his voice smooth but dangerous. The girl's chest heaved. "You know him. You worked together. He trusted you." Before she could say more, 2 guards rushed into the room. They grabbed her arms, their grip tight. She kicked and thrashed, her small frame twisting like a wild animal. "No. Let me go. Please." The millionaire watched, his expression unreadable. The girl's father lay motionless, the machine beside him beeping steadily. One of the doctors whispered, "Sir, we need your final approval to proceed." The girl stopped struggling suddenly. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice turned low and fierce. "You think you can bury the truth? You think turning off that machine will make your secrets disappear?" The millionaire's jaw tightened. The guards hesitated, glancing at him for orders. The girl leaned forward, her eyes burning. "He told me everything. About the project. About what you did. You owe him." For a heartbeat, the room went still. The millionaire's calm mask flickered. Then he raised a hand, signaling the guards to wait. The streets were always cold at dawn. The girl huddled under a torn blanket next to her father, who lay shivering on a cardboard bed. His face was gray, his breath so shallow they barely fogged the air. She tucked the blanket tighter around him, her fingers brushing the feverish heat of his skin. Too hot again, she thought. The medicine was running out. She stood up, her stomach growling. The city was just waking up, shopkeepers unlocking doors, cars honking in the distance. She walked to her usual spot near the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread made her dizzy with hunger. Her bare feet ached against the icy pavement. "Please," she whispered to a woman in a warm coat hurrying past. "My daddy's sick. Just a little money for medicine." The woman didn't even look at her. This was her life now. Begging. Searching trash bins for food. Racing to the free clinic before it closed. But 2 weeks ago, everything had gotten worse. Her father's coughing had turned into something dark and wet, his eyes glassy. The doctors at the clinic said his lungs were failing. "He needs real medicine," they'd said. Expensive medicine. She clenched her fists, thinking of the hospital room, the millionaire's cold eyes, the beeping machines. She hadn't lied. Her father had told her things. Fragments of stories whispered in the dark, when the pain let him speak. "He was like a brother to me," her father had said once, his voice weak. "We dreamed of saving lives, but greed changes people." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled photo, its edges frayed. It was the only thing they'd saved when they fled their old apartment. In the photo, her father stood smiling beside a younger man in a lab coat, the millionaire. Behind them was a sign, Project Life Shield, Breakthrough in Medical Technology. Her father's words echoed in her mind. We created something important. Something that could have helped millions. But he wanted to sell it for profit. I refused. And then the accident started. A sudden coughing fit shook her father back at their cardboard shelter. She sprinted to him, pulling a half-empty bottle of pills from her bag. "Daddy, take this," she pleaded, shaking a pill into his palm. He swallowed it with a sip of muddy tea, his hand trembling. "You shouldn't waste these on me," he rasped. "You're going to get better," she said fiercely, ignoring the fear clawing her chest. But that night, when he fell into a fitful sleep, she crept to the abandoned subway tunnel where they stored their few belongings. Under a pile of old newspapers was a folder, stolen from a trash bin outside the Millionaire's office. Inside were papers with words she didn't understand: toxicity reports, clinical trial failures, liability. And one name, repeated over and over: Project Life Shield. The mansion was silent, but the millionaire couldn't sleep. He paced his study, the girl's words echoing in his head. "You owe him." Moonlight spilled through the tall windows, casting shadows over the framed awards on the walls: Innovator of the Year, Global Health Pioneer. He stopped in front of an old photo on his desk. In it, two young men in lab coats stood laughing, their arms slung over each other's shoulders. The girl's father was on the left, his smile bright and hopeful. The millionaire, then just a hungry young scientist, stood beside him. He sank into his leather chair, rubbing his temples. Memories clawed at him. 20 years earlier. The lab was cramped, lit by flickering bulbs. The two men worked side by side, their faces glowing in the light of computer screens. "It's working," the girl's father shouted, holding up a vial of clear liquid. "This formula reverses organ failure. Do you know how many lives we'll save?" Back then, the millionaire had believed it too. They'd celebrated with cheap coffee and dreams of clinics in every slum. But then the offers came. Pharmaceutical companies. Investors. Millions for exclusive rights to their cure. "We can't sell it to one company," the girl's father had argued, slamming his fist on the table. "This belongs to the world." But the millionaire had grown up poor. He'd seen his mother die of a sickness she couldn't afford to treat. Money protects, he told himself. Money saves. One night, he signed the deal in secret. When his friend found out, he threatened to expose everything. "You're betraying everything we stood for," he'd roared. The millionaire closed his eyes, the guilt sour in his throat. He hadn't meant for the accident to happen. The lab fire. The chemical leak. His friend's collapse. He'd paid the doctors to call it a rare illness, buried the research, and sold the modified formula for 10 times the price. Now, staring at the photo, he muttered, "I saved myself. That's all anyone does." A knock startled him. His assistant stood at the door, holding a tablet. "Sir," the doctors called again. "They need your decision about the patient." The millionaire's finger hovered over the approve button on the screen, the order to disconnect the life support. But the girl's fiery eyes flashed in his mind. He told me everything. What if she knew about the original formula? The one that could cure without side effects? The one he'd locked away? "Delay the decision," he snapped. "And find that girl. Bring her to me. Quietly." The girl waited until the streetlights flickered off. The millionaire's office tower loomed ahead, its glass walls reflecting the first pale light of dawn. She'd watched the building for days, memorizing the guards' routines. 2 minutes, she thought. That's how long she had between the night shift leaving and the day shift arriving. Her heart pounded as she slipped through a delivery entrance, her bare feet silent on the concrete. The hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and money. She ducked into a stairwell, climbing floor after floor, her legs burning. The millionaire's office was on the top floor. The door was locked, but the girl pulled a bent paperclip from her pocket. Her father had taught her this trick years ago, back when they still had a home. For emergencies, he'd said. The lock clicked open. Inside, the room was massive. A polished desk. Leather chairs. Shelves lined with trophies and fake smiles in framed photos. The girl didn't care about any of it. She went straight to the computer. Password protected. Of course. She glanced around, her eyes landing on a calendar on the desk. A date circled in red, June 12th. Her father's birthday. She typed it in. The screen lit up. Files filled the desktop: Project Life Shield, financial reports, trial data, cover-up protocols. Her hands shook as she clicked open a folder labeled Original Formula. Diagrams flashed on the screen. Chemical equations. Notes in her father's handwriting: safe for all patients. Cost, $2 per dose. A noise made her freeze. Footsteps. Down the hall. She yanked a USB drive from the computer, stuffing it into her pocket. Papers spilled from a drawer as she rifled through it: insurance documents, signed NDAs, and a voice recorder. She pressed play. "Make sure the trial fails," said a cold, familiar voice. The millionaire. "And if he resists, escalate the accidents." The footsteps grew louder. She grabbed the recorder and bolted to the window. No time for the stairs. She slid down the fire escape, the metal rattling. A shout came from above. "Stop! Thief!" The girl hit the ground running. The USB drive burned in her pocket. She darted into an alley, pressing herself against a dumpster. Guards sprinted past, radios crackling. Spread out. She can't have gone far. The girl clutched the stolen files. For the first time in months, she smiled. Proof. The world would see what the millionaire had done. But then, a shadow fell over her. A security guard blocked the alley's exit, his flashlight beam blinding her. "Got you," he growled. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a knife. The girl squinted, her back pressed against the cold dumpster. The guard stepped closer, his boots crunching gravel. "Hand over what you stole," he demanded. Her fingers tightened around the USB drive. No. This was her father's only chance. Without proof, the millionaire would silence them forever. A stray cat screeched nearby. The guard flinched, turning his head for half a second. That's all she needed. She lunged to the side, grabbing a lid from a trash can and hurling it at him. It clanged against the wall, and he stumbled back. She sprinted past him, darting into the maze of alleys. Shouts erupted behind her. "She's heading east. Cut her off." The slums woke up around her, street vendors setting up carts, children chasing rats, laundry fluttering between crumbling buildings. She zigzagged through the chaos, her bare feet slapping the wet pavement. A motorbike roared behind her. She glanced back, 2 guards on a bike, gaining fast. She ducked under a clothesline, sending shirts flying into the riders' faces. The bike swerved, crashing into a stack of crates. But more guards appeared ahead, blocking the alley's exit. Think. Think. She spotted a narrow gap between 2 shacks and squeezed through, scraping her elbows. The guards cursed, too bulky to follow. "Hey! Over here," a voice hissed. A boy her age peeked out from a rusty door. She recognized him, the one who sometimes shared scraps of bread with her. He waved frantically. She dove into the shack, and he slammed the door shut. Inside, 3 other street kids crouched in the dim light. A girl with a braided hair handed her a dirty cloth to wipe her face. "Who's chasing you?" the boy whispered. Rich men, she panted. Bad men. The kids exchanged glances. They knew all about bad men. The boy peeked through a crack in the door. They're searching the market. We'll get you out the back. They crawled through a hole in the shack's wall, emerging into a sewage-smelling tunnel. The girl gagged but kept moving. Above them, guards shouted orders. They'll check the tunnels soon, the braided-hair girl said. You need to get to the rooftops. The boy nodded. Follow me. They climbed a wobbly ladder to a rooftop, the city sprawling below like a beast waking up. The Millionaire's tower glittered in the distance. The girl pulled out the USB. This can stop him. But I have to get it to the police, or the news, or someone. The boy frowned. Police here work for men like him. But there's a reporter, woman in a red coat. She asks questions near the train station every morning. Finds truths. Hope flickered in the girl's chest. Where's the station? 2 blocks. But, he pointed. Below, guards swarmed the streets, showing her photo to vendors. The Millionaire's black car idled nearby, its tinted window rolling down just enough to reveal his icy stare. You'll never make it alone, the boy said. We'll distract them. Before she could argue, the kids scattered. One knocked over a fruit cart, sending oranges rolling into the street. Another pulled a fire alarm. Sirens blared. People shouted, crowding the guards. Go, the boy urged. She ran across the rooftops, leaping gaps between buildings. The wind whipped her hair, and the USB dug into her palm. Almost there. But then a helicopter thundered overhead, a news chopper, its camera pointed down. No. The Millionaire couldn't let this story go public. The station was just ahead. She climbed down a drainpipe, her hands raw and bleeding. The reporter in the red coat stood near a coffee cart, scribbling in a notebook. Wait, the girl called, running toward her. A black van screeched to a halt between them. 3 men jumped out, the Millionaire's men. She turned to flee but froze. Behind her was a dead-end alley. Above her, a fire escape. She climbed, her muscles screaming. The men followed, their shoes pounding the metal stairs. At the top, she stumbled onto the roof. The edge loomed, a 10-story drop to the street below. The men stepped closer, blocking her escape. Give us the drive, one said, holding out his hand. The girl stepped back, her heels hanging over nothingness. She raised the USB over the void. Come closer, and I drop it. The men hesitated. Down on the street, the Millionaire watched from his car, his face pale. The wind roared in the girl's ears. Her hand shook as she held the USB over the edge, the tiny drive glinting in the sunlight. Below, crowds gathered, pointing up at her. The Millionaire's men froze, their eyes darting between her and their boss's car. You think that's a threat? One man sneered. Drop it. We'll just say you're a thief who fell. The girl's heart hammered. They're lying. She tightened her grip. Try me. Suddenly, the Millionaire's car door slammed. He strode toward the building, his expensive coat flapping. People on the street whispered, cameras flashing. He ignored them, barking into his phone, call off the helicopter. Now. The girl leaned further back, her toes gripping the rooftop's edge. Stay away. The Millionaire stopped, raising his hands. Listen to me. That USB, it's not what you think. Liar, she shouted, her voice cracking. I heard the recording. You poisoned him. The crowd gasped. A teenager live streaming nearby zoomed in on her face. The Millionaire's jaw twitched. You don't understand. That formula, it was unstable. Dangerous. I protected people. By selling a fake cure? Letting people die? Her tears blurred the city below. My daddy trusted you. The millionaire hesitated. For a split second, his cold mask slipped. Guilt flickered in his eyes. A woman's voice cut through the noise. Let her speak. The reporter in the red coat pushed through the crowd, her phone recording. What's on that drive, sweetheart? Proof, the girl cried. Proof he stole my daddy's work. Proof he's been lying. The millionaire's face went pale. Don't, but the girl threw the USB. It arced through the air, straight toward the reporter. The millionaire lunged, but a street kid darted in, catching it midair. The crowd erupted. Play it, someone yelled. The reporter plugged the drive into her phone. Static hissed, then the millionaire's voice boomed out, make sure the trial fails, escalate the accidents if he resists. The crowd went silent. Then, an angry roar. Murderer! Call the police. The millionaire backed away, but the crowd surrounded him. His men fled, lost in the chaos. He stared up at the girl, his eyes wide with panic. On the rooftop, her legs gave out. She sank to her knees, watching as the reporter held up the phone, the recording playing on loop. News vans screeched to a halt. Police sirens wailed. But her relief faded as she spotted the millionaire's gaze, not on the crowd, but on her. His lips moved silently, you win. Then he turned and ran, disappearing into the chaos. The hospital room was quiet now. Machines beeped softly as the girl sat by her father's bed, clutching his hand. His skin was warmer, his breaths deeper. The doctors had rushed him into surgery after the police arrived, using the original formula from the USB to flush the poison from his veins. Will he wake up? She'd asked, her voice small. We don't know, the doctor said gently. But his heart is stronger. Outside the room, chaos continued. News crews camped in the hallway, shouting questions every time the door opened. Where's the millionaire? Will he face charges? The girl ignored them. She only cared about the slow rise and fall of her father's chest. A knock made her turn. The reporter in the red coat stood there, holding a steaming cup of soup. Thought you might be hungry, she said. The girl hesitated but took the soup. It burned her throat, but she drank it greedily. That USB saved lives, the reporter said softly. Hospitals are already making the real cure. Cheap. For everyone. The girl stared at her father. Doesn't matter if he's not here to see it. The reporter opened her mouth to reply but froze. The girl followed her gaze. Her father's eyelids fluttered. Across town, the millionaire sat in a jail cell, his head in his hands. The iron bars smelled of rust and regret. His lawyers had abandoned him. His fortune was frozen. Through a tiny window, he heard news anchors dissect his downfall, philanthropist or fraud? The lie that killed thousands. A guard approached. Visitor. The millionaire didn't look up. Tell the vultures I have nothing to say. Not a reporter, the guard said. A priest. The old priest sat across from him, hands folded. Do you know why I'm here? The millionaire laughed bitterly. To save my soul? No. To deliver a message. The priest slid a crumpled note through the bars. The millionaire recognized the handwriting instantly, the girl's father. His hands shook as he read. You once asked me why I refused to sell our cure. It wasn't about money. It was about the night we stayed late in the lab, eating cold pizza, talking about the lives we'd save. That man is still in you. Let him out. The millionaire's throat tightened. He hadn't cried in decades. Back at the hospital, the girl's father stirred. His eyes opened, bleary but alive. "Daddy," the girl whispered, tears streaming down her face. He smiled weakly, lifting a hand to touch her cheek. "My brave girl." She buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing. The reporter quietly closed the door, giving them privacy. When the girl finally pulled back, her father's smile faded. "Where is he?" "In jail," she said. "They're charging him with everything." Her father stared at the ceiling. "He wasn't always like this. Power twists people." "Doesn't excuse him," the girl muttered. "No," her father said softly. "But hate will twist you too." The next morning, the millionaire stood in court, cameras flashing. The judge listed his crimes: fraud, endangerment, conspiracy. "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" the judge asked. The millionaire turned to the girl and her father, sitting in the front row. The girl glared. Her father's gaze was unreadable. The millionaire's voice broke. "I will release every patent. Every formula. For free. And I'll fund clinics in every city. Whatever it takes." The courtroom buzzed. The judge frowned. "That doesn't erase your actions." "I know," the millionaire said, looking straight at the girl's father. "But let me try." The girl opened her mouth to protest, but her father squeezed her hand. "Wait," he whispered. The girl stood at the edge of a crowded street, watching workers hang a new sign over a clinic door: "Free Life Shield treatments here." Inside, nurses handed out tiny vials of clear liquid, the real cure, now costing less than a cup of tea. A woman hugged her sobbing child, whispering, "You're going to be okay." The girl smiled, but her eyes were older now. Bravery had carved lines into her face that hadn't been there before. Her father touched her shoulder. "Ready to go?" They walked past the clinic, through streets that felt lighter somehow. Newspapers in trash bins showed headlines: "Disgraced Millionaire Funds 100 Clinics Nationwide," and "Miracle Cure Saves Thousands." "Do you think he meant it?" the girl asked quietly. "Changing, I mean." Her father paused. "People can change, if they stop running from themselves." In a rundown hospital on the city's outskirts, a man in a faded janitor's uniform mopped the floors. His face was gaunt, his hair streaked with gray. Patients hurried past him, unaware that the man scrubbing bloodstains off tiles had once owned skyscrapers. When a child collapsed in the hallway, coughing, the janitor dropped his mop. He carried the boy to the emergency room, shouting, "Life Shield Veal, now." The doctors scrambled, too busy to wonder how a cleaner knew the exact dosage. Later, the janitor sat alone in a supply closet, unwrapping a sandwich from his lunchbox. A crumpled photo peeked out of his pocket, two young men laughing in a lab. Back home, the girl opened a letter. No return address, just a single sentence in messy handwriting: "Tell your father the clinics are working." She showed it to her father. He read it, then tossed it into the stove. The flames swallowed the words, but not the quiet smile on his face. "Why'd you burn it?" she asked. "Some stories don't need proof," he said. "Just action." 1 year later, the reporter in the red coat found the girl at a school, her first day back since the streets. "How does it feel?" the reporter asked, "knowing you changed the world?" The girl glanced at her classmates, kids she'd once begged beside, now clean and scribbling in notebooks. "I didn't change it," she said. "I just reminded people they could." The reporter tilted her microphone. "What's next for you?" The girl thought of late-night talks with her father, of clinics packed with grateful families, of a janitor who never spoke but always stayed late. "I'm going to be a doctor," she said. "The kind that listens." Final scene: the camera pans over the city, the glittering towers, the slums, the clinics with long lines of hopeful faces. It stops at a hospital window, where the janitor watches the sunset. In his hand, a vial of life shield cure glints like a tiny star. The girl's voice plays over the scene, soft but unshakable. Even the smallest light can chase away the dark. You just have to be brave enough to shine.